Hi, my name is Michael, and today I'm going to be talking to you about You, the novel by Carolyn Kepnes. The main topic I'll be discussing is the idea of the self, or the presence of the self and the lack thereof that we read about with Jo. Technically, the book, I'd say, still is a first-person perspective, but we have that second-person observation. That's the majority of what the book is, and I think that allows for Jo to deflect any concept of what he himself should be, and to remain sort of anonymous in a sense. I know we've discussed a lot this semester about the anonymity that one has when, swiping behind a phone. If you're on Tinder or something, you can just swipe left on people and it's completely impersonal. It's easy to swipe on somebody when you're basing everything off of their profile and not really associating with your own, like, would I be a good fit for this person? And I think that's sort of the approach that Jo takes when it comes to observing and stalking Beck, following the idea that there is a you but there is no me, or there is awareness of others but no self-awareness. I think that there's two main ideas or schools of thought that Jo has regarding this concept. So the first one is that he tries to figure other people out. He has these very vague concepts that he claims to be specific, and he associates people by their tastes, by their interests, and then sort of extrapolates that to fill in the blanks that he doesn't know about them. And the other main thing is that Jo sort of avoids assigning himself a role or an identity. He is very vague about himself, but in an opposite way, where he is not confined to any category based off of his tastes. So when Jo judges other people, it is all by association, by they do this, that must mean that about them. So for example, when he meets Benji, the whole home soda, club soda thing, he makes huge judgments about that. When he goes to Peach's party for the first time, on page 112, there's a Brown University drum circle, and he says they're covering Jane Says and singing as if they know about lust and weakness. Jo knows nothing about these people. They very well could know about lust, weakness, so on and so forth, but because they're associating themselves with this drum circle, Jo omits any possibility that they have these real experiences. He doubts other people's experiences based off of tastes or interests. Another good example is around page 78, when people start fluttering in to buy Dr. Sleep, the new Stephen King book. Jo talks about them in such a negative light. He says, "That's the problem with this never-ending centipede of lemmings, Beck. You know they're all pussies. Each and every one of them. They buy these books to get scared because their lives are too easy. How pathetic is that?" It's obviously an enormous blanket statement to say that people who read Stephen King are people who have not suffered in life or don't have horrors of their own to face. Towards the end of the book, on page 356, Jo is very worried about Beck discovering the box, the Beck box, where all of her, the things he's stolen from her are contained inside this box. And I think that this idea of having her in the box, and then eventually when she's in the cage at the end, just speaks to how he tries to encapsulate people. He doesn't try to deepen his relationship. He just tries to understand people in short, concise, catchy ways. Drawing from this, for me, it became very hard to comprehend what the purpose of Karen Minty was, because Jo is, he tries to categorize everyone and everything, and he categorizes Beck, no problem. But when it comes to Karen Minty, he finds her too simple or too categorical almost, and that sort of baffles me. And so I wonder if anybody else has any comments on that or could just answer that question for me. Joe lacks a complete sense of self, where he is allowed to make these accusations about other people. He himself is absolved from any of these accusations. One of the biggest recurring things is the Dan Brown book, where one of the earliest customers in the book comes in to buy the Da Vinci Code, and Joe is extremely judgmental, and he's saying it comes from a place of, a lack of worth or substance. But then at the end, when Joe forces Beck to dive into Da Vinci Code with him, he is not capable of being brought down, even though there's this huge contradiction going on inside his head where he's made remarks about people who read Dan Brown, terrible. But then when he reads Dan Brown, it's like a romantic, very romantic thing. Same thing on page 372. He criticizes Beck for spying on him, but obviously that's what Joe's been doing the entire book. And these contradictions are what leave a gaping hole in his character, because he is not any of those things that he accuses other people of being, even though he's doing the same things. Joe is very backwards in his accusations. On page 157, he calls Benji a klepto brat. But, I mean, Joe has stolen so much already at this point. And I think Vanshika, I don't know if that's how you say it, but she mentioned that Joe is contradictory in one of her questions. And that's insanely true. I mean, he is willing to put people in this easily paintable position while he himself is absolved of any accusations or even descriptions. Like in the book, to my knowledge, Joe really has no personal description, physical description, besides at one point he says he's muscular and he tries to show off. He doesn't say anything about his makeup or anything like that. And I think more often than not, Joe is describing himself by what he isn't rather than what he is. So talking more about Joe's vacancy of self, the name Joe Goldberg is so bland as heck. That's what I put in my notes. And I wonder if Kepnes did this with the intent to make it seem like it could be an everyman, like, because Guinevere Beck is such an illustrious name, but Joe Goldberg is very plain, very simple. I wonder if it's sort of like we've looked back in the previous texts, kind of like the namelessness that occurs in some of the texts that we've read. I wonder if Carolyn Kepnes has the same approach with giving him a vague name to make it seem more plausible for anybody. Another thing that somebody mentioned in the Discord is Peach's final word before Joe kills her. She says you. She looks back and says you. And I wonder if this is just a recognition of self that Joe has been denying. Nobody else really recognizes what he is. Nobody has Joe in a box. And I wonder if this is a shout out to, like, Joe, like, you exist and I see you and this is what you are. What would have changed in terms of the emotions I felt reading it if she had said something else instead of you? For example, if she had said Joe, or if she had said Joseph for her last word. Would Joe, hearing his own name, be enough to maybe jog him out of this horrific frenzy that he's in, where he's willing to kill somebody? If that even is Joe's real name, I'm sure that, through some fan fiction backstory, his real name's like Devin. The reason I say vacancy of self is because there is no central identity containing what Joe is. There is no big, long paragraph describing, I am Joe. I like this. I don't like this. I do this because of this. There's nothing like that. So for myself, I would say that I am Michael. I like arts. I don't like sports. So that way, I'd probably be more inclined to take artistic roles rather than athletic roles, right? Like I'd be more likely to join a reading book club or rather than a sports club. And I think Joe, with this vacancy of self, he's open. He doesn't have to choose between any of this. So that's why Joe represents a lot of different roles. He plays an animal. He plays the role of an animal when he goes to Beck's house and he pees in her shower, as he says, to stake territory, right? And the way that they describe their sexual interactions, ripping into her, very animalistic. And he adopts that role of an animal. But he adopts the role of a lion tamer, is what he says, or a zookeeper. When Beck is in the cage and she's lashing out, Joe is not the animal anymore. He is the animal tamer. He's saying, I need to do these to put Beck back into her place so that she can learn and reform. He also identifies as a teacher when it comes to quizzing Benji about the books that they've read. On page 155, after Benji is dead and he's cremated, Joe even says, I'm no undertaker, but he gives it his best when it comes to dealing with Benji's dead body. And then these roles extrapolate further than just, job titles, because he takes the role of being Karen's boyfriend. He takes the role of being Dan Fox, right? The psychiatry patient. He is a chameleon. He is constantly changing as to avoid confronting the idea that he needs to have a self. Emery also mentioned in the Discord, as his presentation was the visual representation of you. And so I've finished reading the book and I've watched the first episode of the television show, and one of my biggest gripes with the television show is that Joe has this perfectly put together self. Like he is somebody. And when I'm reading the book, it's hard to see Joe as somebody because we're so lost in his thoughts and they're so scrambled. It's hard to sort of collect him and pin him into this one concise mind, this one concise body. But the difficulty with the show, that visualization, at least, I don't think it works as strong as the book. And I'm not a huge fan of the book, but that's definitely one issue that I had with the show. The book does a good job of spreading Joe across all these different ideas, and he's sort of he's not even a person, right? He's all these different things moving across, spreading into Beck's life. But I won't keep watching the show, particularly because I don't like Paco, or I just think that he makes Joe way too sympathetic. But if anybody else does keep watching the show or has finished the show, let me know if how his representation is in the show. Whether he is confined to this one personality that I've seen in the first episode, or if things branch out a bit more and he is a bit more diverse. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe and leave a comment in the comment section below. My discussion questions are up, so feel free to answer them. If you don't want to, that's cool.